Let me first start off. I just mentioned the budget workshops. Just to recap, for our community, we do a lot of work prior to this night. We had our workshop back in November, on November 20th. That was the first workshop, and then budget workshop number 2 on December 14th. I want to really give kudos, to the team, the admin team, all of our staff members. They really work pretty quick out of the gate when the school year starts to be putting the school budgets together and pushing them up to central office. And then I have to thank Mariana for, it's one thing to have a good finance director. It's another thing to have an amazing finance director. And Mariana does a phenomenal job. So thank you, Mariana, for how quickly she puts things together, how thorough she is, the work that happens between the workshops. We sit down, we cross-reference, and that's how we saw our percentage drop, because we catch things that might have been doubled up between a school budget as well as a department budget, or maybe something that was in Annalise's or Kim's budget. So that's how we cross-check, and that's the time we spend between the workshops. But again, kudos to Mariana for the work that she does, with that. So always have to reflect back on our mission statement and our Board of Ed goals. Everything we do, every dollar we allocate, every dollar we spend, all surfaces around this mission statement and those goals and those goal areas. I think we're proud of those goals. The board put a lot of hard work into those goals back in the summer. And we are focused on those as we move to this year. And many of those will continue as they have done for the previous year as well. Some of those were carryover. So just to make sure we allocate and understand, our focus and what we always look back on. So there's always a story to every budget, every year. This is my 11th year as superintendent on 11 budgets. And there's been a story for every single budget. The story this year, and we feel good about this, is the fact that it's a fairly straightforward budget this year. I know last year we had a lot of issues because the percent increase was very high. We are in a better place this year, as we talked about through the workshops. So this budget is about maintaining programming, as well as continuing to support our students and our staff through making sure that resources continue, as well as the allocation of staff across each of our schools remains intact. Also, we've done a lot of hard work on bringing in grant funding to help offset. So we'll talk about some of that grant funding and the difference between last year and this year in those dollars. So we'll get there in just a minute. You saw this slide at the workshop. I just want to revert back to it because it shows the 2022-23 and then 23-24 and then next year's what we had come out of the gate with for initial, that's the red bar, versus what we were approved at the town. So 22-23, our initial out of the gate was a 7.03% increase over the current year. The town approved a final 3.64 at referendum. Remember last year, we were out of the gate at 10.19% of an increase, very high. The town ultimately approved a 6.80% increase at referendum. This year, as you remember at the workshops, we started off at 6.89. Then at the December workshop, we brought forward the 6.08. You can see the reduction, which I mentioned, again, a lot of work by Mariana, the departments, and Annalise, Kim, Crystal, and everybody. We reduced that down by catching things and cross-referencing. So the 6.08 is where we're at the December workshop. And that's where what we're bringing forward this evening. Our current year operating budget is $57,789,852. The proposed 24-25 operating budget is $61,301,559. That is a proposed 6.08 over the current fiscal year. Again, lower than what we were approved at last year at referendum to start. So the drivers for that, again, I had shared this slide at the workshop. Almost 4.25% are salaries and employee benefits. The 2.54 and the 1.65. That averages or adds up to about 4.19. And then you can see, the remainder of the items that make up the rest of the budget percent increase to get us to the 6.08. But in any operating school budget, district budget, it's mostly salaries and benefits. That's broken down further. You did see this from previous at the workshop as well, but want to make sure the community had a chance to see the actual dollars associated with each of those amounts and the changeover from the prior year. which again equates out to the 6.08. And then our fixed expenses, we always like to bring this forward because it's an important slide. Oops. Okay, so my device ran into a problem and needs to restart, but I'll work off of that. Grant, can you control that as well?
No, I cannot.
I'll get in, Jeff.
Okay, you can get in.
Just give me a moment.
I'm restarting here. But the fixed expense slide, we show this every year. I can't read that number for you, but I believe it's 96.5%. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes, 96.5% of our overall budget is fixed expenses, contracts, things that we cannot change.
You are correct.
Let me log back in quick here. See if it should pop up. Hold on. It's just right. Have our
I'm almost there.
two-factor authentication. By the time you get there, it will be. It goes. Sorry, restart. There we go. Restore pages. Okay,
Are you there?
we're back. I
You're
think.
good?
Let's see.
Okay.
I'm just gonna have to share my screen again, I think.
Are you logged back into the
Oh,
Zoom?
you know what? I think I lost. No, I lost the Zoom.
Oh,
Annalise, I'm counting on you.
all right, let me try.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Hold on, I'm good.
I lost my Zoom connection.
Technology. Give me just a
I
second.
tell you, that was strange.
No, we got it.
We were at fixed expenses. There we go. So again, with that fixed expenses, well, Annalise is pulling that up. It's a small sliver of what we really have to work with as it pertains to flexibility in dollars, because most everything is it's contractually related. All right, so if we go on to the next one, we talked a little bit briefly about this scenario, this slide at the December workshop, an option that the board can consider. And this is something we can talk more about, on the 22nd, or as we proceed through discussions, budgetary discussions. In the 6.08% increase, insurance currently is at a 10% increase. We left it there on purpose for us to have some discussions and wait a little bit longer to see what would happen with the state. We're part of the state partnership plan, so our community knows, just as a reminder. Their recommendation is between a 3% and a 7% increase for the coming year. If we move that down to 8%, you can see there'd be a savings of $152,296. Each percent is about 72, roughly 73,000. If we go lower, we'll kind of show you a slide where those decreases on the next slide. But we could have savings there if we drop from 10% down to 8%. So that could bring our 6.08 down. Additionally, we're going to go back and I'll show you the elementary class size slide, because we can sit everybody within the guidelines and through attrition, eliminate 2 elementary positions. We have some retirements. Nobody would lose their job. And we could remove 2 positions and still have every class within those guidelines from the chart, which we'll show you that in a second. So those 2 things combined could bring you down, and again, this is something the board will have to discuss further, could bring you down to a 5.48%. I would not recommend any other further reductions. That budget between the 6.08 and the 5.48, and again, health insurance, we'll see what happens. It definitely could go lower, but I would not recommend any further staffing reductions or program reductions, because it would have an impact. And the budget that we put forward will give us everything that we need moving forward. So with that health insurance piece, as you can go to the next slide.
Oops.
So I mentioned the 10%. We have the 3% to 7% range. We find out this month, another week or 2 maybe.
The 23rd is we have another meeting.
Meeting with the state, so the state partnership plan. We'll get more information on the health insurance numbers. So hopefully they're remaining within that range of 3 to 7, or even I would hope that it would always be lower, but you can see the scenarios. If we go from the 8%, which is 152,000 in savings, if you dropped it to 7%, it would be $228,444 in savings, and then 6% and 5%. So you can see the reduction scenarios there. So if you ultimately landed at 5%, it would save us $380,740. So it's pretty hefty dollars when it comes to insurance. So let's hope that number does come down, but we won't know that until after, we're going into February, even later, for a final budget number. So class size, mentioned the elementary class sizes, mentioned through attrition, the potential for reducing 2 positions and not impacting anybody's job. Wanted to bring back the class size guidelines and chart. You can see grade K and 1, we're up to 18 students in a class is the recommended per the board's regulation, in board's policy as guidelines. Grade 2 and 3, up to 20 students in a class, and grade 4, up to 22. And then we've got some narrative about the middle school, as well as, high school component. If we go to that elementary enrollment slide, this is next year's. We just rolled over our class, our grade levels to the next year. Remember Stacy Muscarella came and talked about the kindergarten and how we formulate all of that. So those estimated kindergarten numbers are in there for next year. Every average class size is sitting within the range. Now, Niantic Center is on the cusp of kindergarten at 17.5. 18 is kind of the cutoff. And you can see Flanders is at 11. They're below the guidelines. So there could be some movement within there. If we get a few more kids, we might have to come back to the table and have some further discussions. But this right now, kindergarten specifically, is every child that Stacy Muscarella knows about and reaching out to daycare is rolling everything over. Even students that say they're going to come, families that say they're going to come, might not. So that's still, obviously, we know kindergarten will remain something that we'll continue to watch and see where the numbers go. But just a snapshot as of right now, that's where we land. And that's again with 2 staff positions reduced, 1 at Niantic Center and 1 at Flanders. Okay. Middle school, high school, you saw this too at the workshop. Just wanted to circle back. Really no change number wise at the middle school. High school's got a little dip with that bubble that had gone through. In the middle school, we had some a Kiva reduction a couple years back. It's at the high school now. So looking at 930 down to 903. Let's talk about preliminary requests, and I want to emphasize again, especially for our parent community and our school and town community, that these positions are all in the increase. Everything you see here, totaling 196,631, is in the 6.08% increase over the current fiscal year. So I'm going to have Kim in just a minute talk about the special education teacher, the VCBA piece, as well as the English, the ELL and ML teacher. But I want to just draw your attention to the team leader stipends, the social workers, school psychologists, and speech pathologists. We have team leaders across our departments, a teacher that's leading their grade level, for instance. We feel it's appropriate for a social worker across the district to lead the other social workers, a psychologist to lead the other psychologists in a team leader role, team leader position, bringing them together, having conversations. So there'd be a stipend associated with that. Additionally, middle school sports. We've talked some and heard some information from our community about middle school sports. Middle school sports will be on the agenda for January 22nd. Where we'll have some discussions about that. We put it in the budget for now, and that's something that the board, will have some further discussions on. But it is in the budget to add cheerleading, soccer, and volleyball, in addition to what we currently have, which remember is basketball and swimming. And then the high school stipends at the bottom left, and 2 marching band instructors. The band itself, the parents, they've been, you probably see the collection of cans that they do. They raise money for themselves and they've been using that money to offset and support these additional instructors to help. We feel that it's time for us as a district to support those individuals and not have it be based on cans that they collect. That money can be better served to continue their collection, but to be better served to put into the program itself. So we want 2 additional stipends for school marching band. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kim and Mrs. Davis, our Director of Student Services, is going to talk about the special education teacher and then those other positions from there. Kim?
So the slide is the same from our budget workshops, but for folks at home, we are requesting an additional special education teacher at East Lyme Middle School because if you remember, a few years ago, we added some elementary special education teachers. That crop of children is moving to the middle school. And so you can see by the numbers at the bottom of the slide that the fifth graders we currently have, or fourth graders we currently have transitioning to fifth grade for the 24-25 school year is 52. That's a pretty big number divided by what is currently there is just 2 teachers who would take on fifth grade. So that would be caseloads of, over 25 students per person, which is too high to effectively service the students' needs. The numbers, I put the other grade levels as well, just so you can see where they sit. And we are with 8 kivas at 2 special ed teachers per kiva or per grade level at the moment, just so you can kind of see that. So they are trending up higher. So we, need to look to pivoting our support from, we've been talking about elementary to middle school. The elementary numbers are still large, as there'll be later in the presentation, a prevalence rate slide that just shows our trend overall in East Lyme is higher, even though enrollment is a little bit static. Our special ed numbers are up, which is not unlike many districts around us and the state. So we think this is a reasonable request to maintain, appropriate services for our students. You're on.
I'm driving.
Okay. All righty, and then in order to support programming for some of our specialty programs, I am putting in this request for a an additional half-time board certified behavior analyst. We affectionately call them a BCBA. They support our students on the autism spectrum or with significant behavioral concerns, and the teachers that work with students on a day-to-day basis. So sort of like a speech pathologist or an occupational therapist, they specialize in behavior. We have 2 full-time currently. We'd like to have the opportunity to have one of those positions be a more leadership role in order to train and build infrastructure around for the paras. And so that person then would need a slightly lower caseload to offset that shift, and that's where the half-time BCBA request comes in. So as you can see, that's the first bullet. Quality programming and paraprofessional PD are critical in those programs to work with students on a regular basis. We do have high para staff turnover. It's an entry-level position, but it's also in those specialty programs an intense position. So we want to build infrastructure there so that new folks see a future pathway when they start with us. And then the additional BCBA would support the focus on training and supervision of those paras, curriculum development within the programs, and support a program fidelity and implementation. Additionally, our 2 full-time BCBAs already are dabbling in Tier 1 and Tier 2 consultation just for MTSS for students in general education with their knowledge and expertise. And we would like them to be able to do more of that. But when their caseloads are high and intense, there's only so much time in each day. So we feel like that would be helpful. And you can see on the bottom of that slide with my bad eyes, let's see if I can advance just. Yes, we have 30 students across our ABA cohort, which is pre-K through grade 12. We have 18 students in our PACE program and 28 students projected to be in our therapeutic program for next year. They're already in the programs. Those are just rolling students forward. So that's, a significant amount of students that need that intensive programming with the support of the behavior analyst. And then on the next slide is the multi-language learner teacher, which is another area of growth for our district. Students who speak a language other than English and need to, they're acquiring English as a second language or third language. And the state has norms that we are attempting to follow, which is that at every 40 students, we add an additional 1.9 FTE. So we are approaching that next need benchmark to have an additional teacher. In addition to that, we would be able to more effectively support our newcomer students who speak no English at all, and schedule and create groups based on language proficiency level rather than grade level or schedule availability. It also allows for one full-time multi-language teacher at each level, elementary, middle, and high, which right now we have one person covering middle and high and one person dedicated to elementary. And we also have a unique situation developing at the middle school where we have currently 18 Spanish-speaking students. And the state tells us that if we have 20, we need to offer bilingual programming. So since we are so close to that cusp, if we could hit the jackpot and hire an ML teacher who's bilingual, then we would be proactively planning for both of those needs at the same time. So, and you can see again at the bottom of the slide, our data, our 5-year trend. In 2019, we had 51 students speaking other languages than English, and now we are up to 108. So. And then that last slide is the prevalence rates for special education, which you can see we're up to 19% as of the 22-23 data. And, you know, the state is always reporting that for us 1 year behind our current school years. And you can see the last 5-year trend. So we're usually right neck and neck with the state. We have risen a little bit more. I think that's because we offer quality programming with a highly engaged parental community. And, you know, my staff tell me there must be a bulletin board somewhere, a billboard somewhere that says, come to East Lyme if you need special education support, which I am both proud of and humbled by, but understand the stress that can put on our system. So that's, I guess I'll turn it over to Annalise for more about the Right to Read Act.
Yeah, that's fine. You can double it up.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. So one of the major drivers within my cost center, as you'll see in instructional supplies, is to support the implementation of a primary resource at the literacy level. And so I just wanted to remind the board of some of the state legislation that's helping to guide us in this direction, but also take this opportunity to review the very thorough timeline that East Lyme has taken in order to make a well thought out decision moving forward, and then talk a little bit about the numbers. So many of you might remember this language that came out in legislation back in 2022, almost 2 years ago. And essentially it calls on districts to implement a K-3 reading curriculum model or program that's approved by the Connecticut State Department of Education. In addition to that, we needed to actually implement an assessment, a screening reading assessment to identify K-3 students below reading and proficiency in reading, and we've already done that. So that component is behind us. We've implemented that for this year, but now we really need to make this determination for a reading program. So let me just take a few minutes to very quickly walk you through a 2-year timeline. So we started this journey 2 years ago when the legislation came out. And I pulled together the literacy specialists, and we started to really look at other states who are well ahead of Connecticut and going in this direction in looking at their curriculum and program vetting rubrics. And we use those as a model to develop our own internal vetting rubric. We had actually a phase 1 and a phase 2 rubric. And we use these to start looking at programs we thought the state might put forward for adoption. So we really tried to get out ahead of the state, knowing that once, we know that sometimes decisions can be really short and quick, and that's never really a good place to be. We want to be in a place where we've had time to thoroughly look at our options and make an informed decision. So by the fall of 2022, we had already started to look at programs, but we were completed vetting all of the approved programs that the state had put forward at that time. And we had identified 2 programs in which we were interested in. If you remember, My View was the first program that we piloted, and that happened in the winter of 2023. And that was a 8 to 12 week pilot, roughly speaking. And at the end of the pilot, the committee decided that we wanted to try on a different shoe. So we went back and we went and piloted the program that came in second in our initial vetting process, which was expeditionary learning. or EL. So we just wrapped up that pilot at the end of December, and I will tell you that if it were between those two programs, we would have gone with EL as our adoption. But the state threw us a little bit of a curveball, which we're kind of used to now, and had actually approved additional programs based on waivers that other districts had written. And so the state had put forth 2 additional options that were feasible for Eastline. We brought our committee back together, did an expedited phase 1 review of those 2 programs, and very quickly learned that only one of them was worth moving forward with a pilot for here. And Eastline, and it's actually what the state calls a compendium. So it's a combination of different things. Foundations is one of those which we already use. Wit and Wisdom is the comprehension component, which is, I would say it's a very similar format. In fact, use some of the similar resources as EL does. And then Haggerty with some of that phonemic awareness that you saw in the carpet a couple of weeks ago. And Geodes, which is a decodable text. So with all of those resources together, this compendium can be an approved resource moving forward. So we are going to move forward with that pilot starting end of January, 3rd and final pilot. And at that time, I feel as though we will be in a very, very good position to have the best fit shoe for Eastline as it relates to a literacy program that's going to meet the needs of our students, but also align to our values in terms of instructional practices in the classroom and is in compliance with the state. But most importantly, is grounded in research around the science of reading and doing what's in the best interest for our kids here in Eastline. And so we plan a full implementation for the fall of 2024. So what those numbers look like, so I have budgeted within our ELPS budget, 112,000 for what we call trade books and consumables. And these numbers are coming off the EL adoption. I will say if we go in the Wit and Wisdom direction, it will be a little bit more expensive, but I'll talk to you about what that will look like if we need to do that. $20,000 in professional development. That's for 1st year implementation. So that's already in the budget, ready to go. We also, because we didn't write a waiver and we opted into moving forward with the state, have received $82,000 from the state in grant funds, which has helped in offsetting the cost of pilots, but also can help with some wiggle room if we go forward with a more expensive program. So right now we're looking at the projected cost of full implementation between $150,000 and $225,000. And so I feel really comfortable with the number that's in the budget right now, aligned to implementation. And if we move forward with a more expensive program, we can roll out the implementation in phases. We don't need to do all of this at once. In fact, it's probably not good practice to do that. So I think with this number, I'm very, very comfortable with moving forward with either a Wit and Wisdom and EL implementation, and we will make adjustments accordingly. I'm going to pass it back over to Jeff.
Continue to roll through those 7.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
So at the December workshop, we were talking about grants, and Bill made a good point. Bill Derry made a good point about what did our grants look like that we had applied for the previous year. So we went back and looked into that further. And this slide depicts what we had received for 22-23, total of 105,187. That does not, these grants do not include our ECS or educational cost sharing, those bigger grants, IDEA grants. This is just grants we've gone out and seeked, without having a grant writer. I'll work on behalf of Elise, Kim, Mariana. So that was 22-23, just to do a look back. Because that was a good point that Bill had made, what did we previously receive? Because we were talking about the grants that we received for this year, which some will roll into 2025 and up to 2026. So we went from 105,000 in grant funding to 1,012,998 in grant funding. So that's a significant difference in additional dollars that we were able to go out grants for and receive. And now we are implementing this year. rolling forward. And I want to kind of talk about some of the impact of those grants, because these are dollars that are not in our operating budget. So we're bringing forth staff, programs, et cetera, through grant funding rather than through our operating budget. So what are these grants doing, for ELPS? The next slide there. So staffing supports. One of the biggest one is the mental health grant that we received, where we have been able to hire an additional psychologist at the high school. Very qualified individual, great hire. She's been working this year, fitting in nicely with, the team over there, and doing some really good work. So that's been a great addition, to the high school. We've talked a lot about our pathways and the educational programming and expansion, that has occurred. That will continue, and we've gotten a lot of grant funding, and Dave Fasulo has led the charge on a lot of those grants. Programming expansion as it pertains to middle school and high school, the tutoring supports and PD training for staff. We have the tutoring, the high dose tutoring grant that we received, which those tutors are now in place. We met with them last week, and they're rolling as of today with the middle school. So that is underway, working with our middle school students to help with recovery from COVID still. And then supplies. Grants are helping to support, equipment, computers, lab items, pathways, materials, EMT course supplies. That's an expensive course, that we're now offering at the high school. A lot of supplies go along with that, and these grants are offsetting that cost. So it's not coming out of our pocket or out of the pockets of students. That leads to community partnerships as well, and the growth there. We've talked a lot about, Furman's Garage. Furman's Garage has now led to accredited class, for 24-25. Send students over there. So we're in the process of getting that organized. The Eastern Connecticut workforce program materials, again, that helps support the EMT high school course. We talked about the aviation and mechanics programs through the National Guard partnership, where they have a van, they come over and they pick up our students, and they drive back. So it's no cost for us for transportation, an excellent piece. Talked about the trade exploration with Porter and Chester, welding, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, Mystic Seaport supporting students that are part of our therapeutic learning program at the high school, where they go off and they can do some team building activities. That's been the premise of that Mystic Seaport grant. And then the electric boat partnership, exploring, the trades, and that's elementary, middle, and high. We talked about elementary, cheese crackers with the cheese in the middle and welding, putting together. So some exciting things that, are happening at all levels as it pertains to the partnership with electric boat. So thanks to Jamie and Olivia. I know you both are working there, so keep that going. And then community partnerships, additionally, that are also things that we're in process of working on. Learn Sustainers of the Sound. That grant, students are obtaining, critical knowledge about long and sound. We've talked some about the regional remote learning project. Our next meeting is on Friday of this week, where we've got the 7 districts. We surveyed our high school staff, and our high school staff members, a fairly high percentage of them are interested in teaching a remote learning class in the evening or in the morning. So we're at that next meeting, we'll be talking about the next steps of surveying students. The MOU between the 7 districts is completed. So this is something that's ready to go for next year. So we'll begin to push those course offerings out across 7 districts. And then the regional course sharing of the EMT course. Right now, we're offering it to Waterford and Limewood Lyme. They're both interested. They would pay a small tuition fee, and they've got students that want to come to the high school. That would be during the day. Kids would come first thing in the morning to that class, and then go back to their respective school. So we're just working through some other red tape with that piece. So those are things we want to continue to grow, continue to shift into, and that's the work that a lot of these grants help to support. The CHC Community Health Center, student-based health center. I know this is kind of taking longer than we thought. I was hoping it would be up in the fall, but hopefully soon. You haven't heard anything further, Deb, right? I thought January, the CHC program.
Today.
An email today, okay.
They've asked us to identify our first couple of students. They're screening for they need to do an inspection of the room. So
Okay.
within the next few weeks.
So within the next few weeks, that should be up and running. Again, the space is identified. The staff member is hired from the outside as well. So we're ready to go with that. So as Mrs. Kelly just mentioned, we're in the process of identifying students. And again, that piece, CHC, will bill, families' insurance, for that cost. And then lastly, this is a big one. This will warrant some conversations that won't have with the capital improvements. Myself, Dr. Lund, Mrs. Stevens, we met with our first selectman, Mr. Cunningham, as well as town finance director, and talked through these capital items. We have some pretty big ticket items, and they're all outlined in narrative format in your budget books. You can read through them for the more specifics. And Chris has talked about some of these at various meetings, but the aquatic center, we're now at a place of a roof replacement rather than a roof fix. Way too much money for the fix, as Chris had outlined in one of his weekly updates. So we're at a replacement stage. It just makes more sense. So $1 million roughly for the roof replacement is reimbursable from the state. So that's one. Keep in mind that we still are at a 41, almost 41%, 40.71% reimbursement from the state for roof projects. So that's the first roof. Why don't we just mention the other two roofs that are in here? So Nyack Center, we need to replace Nyack Center's roof, and we need to replace Lily B. Haynes' roof. And the outline rationale reason, they're all of age. They weren't of age, those two roofs, when we did the school projects, elementary school projects. So I have to make sure we get that out to the community, because community members are going to remember, you just did elementary projects 6 years ago. Did you do the roofs then? No, we didn't. We did Flanders roof, but that was it. We did not do Lily B. Haynes or Nyack Center. So those are due. Lily B. Haynes has a lot of moisture. You'll see a diagram in there that shows red. That's where all the moisture content is. So moisture is not good underneath, between the layers of the top and the structural steel. So we have those three roof replacements. The other big one is the track and turf replacement, mainly the turf field. The turf was put in 2012. So it is of age where it gets an immense amount of use. So it's time for a replacement. Chris talks a lot, and Chris can share some more, at any point as we roll through some further discussions about CIP, but the grass itself, the tines, or we call them tines, right? Is it the term for it? That has really gone down. So it's almost like a new turf would have a fluffier surface. It's still very safe. The impact testing has been done. There's no issues with it. But we've worn down that turf field. It's time for a replacement and to just resurface the track as well. Not fully replaced, but just a resurface. So you can see the cost of 1.25 million. And then Chris or Dr. Lund's continued window and door replacements at the high school, as well as HVAC, the continued recapitalization plan to replace HVAC unit at both the high school and the middle school. That is it for capital. Now, when we talk to the first selectman, one last piece, the senior center needs a new roof. So that's 4 roofs. So the potential of maybe putting all those projects together was something that we were thinking about, we're doing and working with the town on. So we'll see where that goes, but that will warrant some further discussion. And that's it. That's all we have for presentation.